Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our IFPMA webinar on the joint IFPMA, FPA, and Pharma guidance on virtual international medical congresses impacted by COVID-19. I am very pleased to spend the time of this webinar today with you and would like to start this session with giving some words of appreciation. First of all, to the IFPMA EBIC Working Group on Responsible Engagements that has been working around the clock to create this guidance document in an unprecedented speed to meet the pressing need that was there. Sometimes position papers can take up to a year or more, especially if they are done in conjunction with sister associations, as it is the case here. So a big, well-deserved kudos to the working group and its co-chairs to make this challenging task possible in such a short time frame. The outcome is good, but definitely not perfect. Speaking in our new agility language, it is a minimal viable product, and there will be many iterations in the future based on collective feedback and learnings to make it better. I would also like to thank our affiliated member, IPCA, the International Pharmaceutical Congress Advisory Association, and in particular, its co-president, Christian Klaus Roth, who was instrumental in the creation of the document and in making sure it was pragmatic and reality checked. Christian will be one of the speakers today, and he will be joined by Elisabeth Mudry, who is seconded from Roche to IFPMA since the beginning of this year, and who is also one of the driving forces behind this document. And last but not least, a big thanks to Aaron Gutman from BMS, also a key member of the working group on responsible engagement, and Aaron is in charge of the Q&A part of the webinar. Thank you so much to our three experts, and without further ado, I will give the floor to Elie Mudry, who will present the guidance document to us, followed by Christian, who will take us through two practical case studies to apply the guidance. Over to you, Elie.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you to you two for being the one that put the work stream together so that we could work on this topic, which is quite important. So this guidance was created in response to a lot of questions that companies and associations received around medical congresses impacted by COVID-19. And as you heard already, it was at the beginning, but with experience, this may change in the future, so stay tuned. There may be some iteration to this guidance. So what is the scope of this meeting? The scope of the guidance is to look at purely international congresses. An emphasis on international. We're not talking about local congresses, nor maybe more regional. We're really the international ones that are organized by medical societies and that are involving HCPs from all countries. Just as a note, when we talk about HCPs, we are looking at the definition which is given from IFPMA and FPA for HCPs. So this guidance is also looking at the congresses that happened between June until the end of the year, end of December 2020. There are also some considerations that are made for what and how it may look like in 2021, but these are just considerations at this stage. So why did we do this guidance? Well, we realized that we could not apply anymore what was done in purely face-to-face congress, if we can call it this way. But we did not want to reinvent the wheel, and we wanted to replicate a pragmatic approach of the code to international congresses, although it's moved into virtual format. So that's the purpose of it. And also we want to inform all the stakeholders about the arrangement that the companies have to follow for these congresses. Well, as a company, we also need to know and be aware of the guidance that are done by the medical society, so that we are a group that is working together. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when we look at the guidance, we said, okay, we need to look at factors that as companies we need to take into consideration when we are determining the code and the label that should be used as a reference when we start working on this virtual congress. So the decision was that when a meeting is hosted in Europe or by a European or an American medical association, then the FPA code or the pharma code in conjunction with the IFPMA code should be taken into consideration. If there is no regional code, and for this we're looking at the majority of the delegates that would be expected based on what we know from the past, what we know from this face-to-face meeting. If there is no such regional code, then the IFPMA code would apply. That's for the code. Now, looking at the label, the companies will have to assess which is the appropriate label. If it is a meeting hosted by a European association, we would go with the FPA code, and we would use, most probably for the promotional activities, the EMA label. But what is very important is companies, when they assess it, they have to document the justification, which code they are using and why they are using it. And it's very, very important that once this is decided, then all the material that is being reviewed and prepared for this virtual congress is developed according to it. The company also needs to have a disclaimer, because the people entering in, the attendees, they need to know what they're looking at. So the company should have a clear disclaimer saying, looking at the countries where the product has been registered. They should also indicate that the registration may be different from one country to another, or different internationally. And also they should refer the delegate back to the prescribing information that they have in their home country. So this is what they need to do in terms of the code of the label and the label. The next one, please. Now, you all know that when we have a medical congress that is intended for HCPs, all the promotional information is also for HCPs only. There are only a couple of countries where this is different, but in general, it is for HCPs. In this case, it is very important that that the companies work with the medical association societies, congress owner, to ensure that the virtual platform that is being used to share all this information can allow for the delegate categorization. So is it an HCP or is not an HCP? If this is not possible at the higher level, then as a company, we should look at, can we do it? And make sure that the promotional material is only and can only be accessed by HCPs, especially where this is required by applicable rules and regulation. Where the medical association platform does not have the capabilities, then as company, you may look at alternative. As again, it is very important that promotional activities only goes to the intended audience. Next one. Thank you. So what we also look at, because it is virtual, there are some differences. In a way, we want to make sure that the delegates know what they are looking at and what they are accessing. And there is also a need that the delegates confirm also the appropriate privacy statement. They need to know and need to specify that they have the permission to enter a certain area or not, like saying, yes, I confirm I am an HCP and therefore I can go and look at promotional material. They need to know which label is being used for the preparation of this material. And also they need to know that maybe if they are not from the area where, under the code that this has been developed, like, or the label, then they need to look at their own label in their own country. And this is the responsibility of medical association as well, to work together with the company to make sure that these kind of statements are clear and provided to the people that are attending, people being HCPs or others that are attending this meeting. The next one, Sophie, please. We talked before about disclaimers. So a disclaimer is something that is to be worked by the companies, but it could be worked as well with the medical association at a certain level. There are kind of two levels. It could be one when you are entering the Congress itself. At this stage, it would be the medical association to may have certain language of who is accessing what and giving the permission. But there is also a disclaimer that could be done at a company level to make sure that when an HCP is entering a virtual booth or an exhibition, they understand, again, as I said before, in which context the material has been developed. And again, to repeat that the promotional material is intended for a certain type of, for HCPs normally, and in case they are not from the home, from the place where the label is coming from, like if they are not from Europe, or let's say they are from the US, but they are attending a European meeting where the majority of the delegate would be from Europe, they would have to look at their US label because they are from the US. So that's very important to have in the disclaimer. And I believe this is the end of the first part, and I will pass the baton, as we say in French, to Christian for the examples that should help you to go through the guidance better.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for your introduction to the document, and thanks to everybody else on this, on this panel for the work, to get where we are now. So I'm very happy and grateful, that we achieved that in such a short time. So as always, those documents, as Sophie in the introduction said, they are never perfect. But what we tried to achieve was that we give all of us the right level of details, that we can make good judgments, and that we know what basis to apply when it comes to those situations we are now confronted. As you see, we are really following the same principle like in live congresses. So nothing actually what we propose in here now should be sort of a surprise. It's the same principle of looking at material, at the label, and the appropriate disclaimers, like we do it as well in live congresses. Now, what we've done is we have now two cases where we would like to actually explain how to interpret the document in real life scenarios. And I can tell you this was a very interesting exercise. So the first one actually is the European Society of Wobbly Knees. And here we have some sort of general information. It's a Netherlands-based European Medical Society. As you can see, the title of the Congress, we make reference to European Society. And actually, if you look at historical data, this Congress attracts normally participants from Europe. So about 70% are European-based delegates based on historical data. In the context of live congresses, the Congress location normally rotates between European cities and countries, and was planned to be in Paris before moving to a fully virtual setup. Company sponsoring allows for a company booth area and a symposium slot. So this would be the offering from the society to the industry. And actually, in this particular case, the company which was approached has two different products, two different approved products. One, product X, only approved in the US, and product Y approved in the EU, US, but not in Asia. So if you move to the next slide, we want to actually give you a little bit the steps to go through from a thinking perspective, how that case would now actually be looked at with that document, and how we would actually consider it in the context of a truly virtual Congress. So as minimum company actions, as we said, this is a European association targeting European healthcare professionals. We would actually refer to the FPI code as the minimum basis for the Congress activities and the review. From a label perspective, as Adi explained to us, we would actually make the same sort of connection. We would actually refer to the European, to the EMA label, to develop the promotional material and information, and all the materials and documents which would be presented. And again, as Eddie said, this is such an important point. We should always document, any of those decisions and assessments within the different companies, so that any given time later, we know why we have done what we have been doing. Now, talking and working together with this European society, what is very important is to ensure that they have a process in place for the delegates to confirm the terms and conditions we have mentioned. So the terms and conditions to access, that you're accessing a virtual congress, acknowledging you're a healthcare professional, that you are eligible to the information being provided, and that this is clear, to those healthcare professionals and to the congress organizer who is entering which area. As we have said at the beginning as well, virtual congresses are actually having different areas. So you have, virtual exhibition. In the virtual exhibition, you have the promotional booth. Normally, you have as well a medical booth. There's symposia, there are other activities. So what is very important here is really to make sure that prior to entering any of those subcategories, like the virtual booth or symposium, that there is another pop-up box or something else, in place. That again, an acknowledgement is possible. The delegates are healthcare professionals, and that the information being provided is, in this case, for example, based on a European label, and that the ATP should refer to the label of his or her home country. And then when it comes now to the product reference, product X must not be promoted, as the Congress is intended for European ATPs, and as you've seen a little bit before, that product actually, doesn't relate to EU. So that is just giving you a little bit the framework and the thinking, how to actually apply that guidance with, for this particular company, their particular setup and their products. And hopefully, provides you the reassurance to, see European society, European ATPs, FPI code and email label is a very solid and logical package. If we move on to the next slide, to the next case study, we have now taken sort of a similar approach, but here we are talking about a truly international society. And if you think about it, we really, refer here to the notion of international of a society, when it comes to the scope of the medical society, what are the ATPs they're really focusing on? They don't have a regional focus. They're truly globally, reaching out to healthcare professionals, and healthcare professionals from all over the globe are members of this medical society. So that would actually, in a real life Congress scenario, would actually attract delegates from all sorts of countries around the world, and the location as a consequence would rotate throughout the world. And in the particular case of our case too, it would have been in Rio before moving into a virtual setup. So again, here the company would have the opportunity to actually sponsor the Congress with a company booth area and a symposia slot. And the company has as well 2 approved products. One, product X, is only approved in the US, and product Y approved in the US and EU, but not in Argentina. So now if we look into the next slide, we see how we actually would apply the guidance now in the context of an international, purely virtual Congress. So here, as said at the beginning, the society is targeting worldwide healthcare professionals. And as you know, truly worldwide, globally, there is no regional code. So we would actually make a reference to the IFPMA code as a minimum basis for our Congress activities and the review. Now, we have a bit of an assessment to do as a company. Obviously, truly global, there is no global label, there is no global, product. So we would need to look into which actually, label we would use as the reference for the promotion materials and the activities. So in here, we would look at the registration situation of the label, looking into composition, this truly global composition of the Congress, the demographics of the attending ATPs as another point, and then look at the labels we have attained in our own company. And here, you could argue, you could either use the US or the EMA label as reference. However, this is a company decision, and the company should document why they actually have used one label over the other one. And we should always, as I said before, make sure with disclaimers that there's absolute clarity and transparency about the label, and to provide the ATPs with the appropriate framework. Here as well, this is an incredibly important point. We should work together with the medical society to make sure that actually delegates confirm the virtual Congress terms and conditions, ensuring that they're fully aware of where they are enter, that they are healthcare professionals, and they acknowledge that they might be exposed to information which might not be actually approved in their own country. But as in live congresses, we have always actually used disclaimers on any material to make sure that this is transparently managed. And the same important step actually would be here that we ensure prior to entering a virtual booth or symposia that as well we work together with the society to have pop-up boxes or equivalent opportunities to actually acknowledge that, you know, ATPs are entering into those activities, and here to give them the right reference, you know, around the label, you know, and their home country, that they are fully aware of that it's, you know, is sort of an international setup, and that if they're actually attending company activities, that they have the appropriate details. I think with that, we hope we have provided you in 2 case studies the necessary details how to apply. As said at the beginning, you know, this document can't answer all questions. It can't give you all the details, but it gives you the thinkings and the principles, you know, we would like to see being applied for that situation. I think I'm at the end of my case studies. So thank you very much for your attention. And now I would like to hand over to our dear colleague, Aaron, who actually, you know, will cover the Q&A section. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Christian. As a working group, we have received a number of questions around the guidance document, and I'm excited to advise that we have developed a question and answer document that we will publish along with the recording of this webinar. I urge you to review the Q&A document. This Q&A document covers the scope of the guidance, determining which code and label to use, working with medical societies, promotion during the virtual Congress, sponsoring healthcare professionals to participate in the virtual International Congress, and working with regulatory agencies. We all know this is a difficult period and there are still many uncertainties. We encourage you and your company to give feedback on the guidance and any difficulties you may be facing. The working group will be reviewing the guidance as the year ends in readiness for 2021. So we welcome your feedback. So with that, I will hand it back to Sophie.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you, Christian and Eli, for doing this today. And thanks to everyone for joining this webinar. As we said, this is just the beginning. We will continue the journey together with you and hope to hear from you very soon. Goodbye.